Generally Famous is proudly brought to you by Trade Depot. Generally famous for saving Kiwis thousands. Call into one of the stores or visit online at tradedepot.co.nz. Kia ora, Aotearoa, and welcome to Generally Famous. I'm Simon Bridges, and every week I talk to generally famous but always interesting guests about life, love, and what makes them tick. This week, during with a successful media career over 15 years, an extensive background in broadcasting on TV and radio, and more recently, amazing on Dancing with the Stars, Brodie Kane.
Hi, Simon. Sorry, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry.
She started with the sledging in her first two words.
No, but it's because you did. I always remember you've always been such a good sport in kind of taking the piss out of yourself, which I've always appreciated. And there's this great video that you did with me when I was working at the Hits in Christchurch, and you were actually the leader of the National Party at the time. And I
who
said,
would believe that now?
Yeah, I know. No, I didn't mean that. And I said, "Hi, I'm Simon Bridges," and then you pushed me out of the way, and you went, "No, hi, I'm Simon Bridges." So I do appreciate your self-deprecation.
Thank you. Speaking of kind of radio and all that, you are, and you're definitely generally famous. I feel like we're at peak Brodie Kane at the moment.
Oh, do
you? You are everywhere I look.
Oh, so you got to be careful with that, eh? You don't want to be thrashed around and people get sick of you, though.
Overexposed.
You got to try and sort of find the balance. Yeah.
Well, look, I turned on ZM last night.
You turned on ZM.
Emlyn, my 10-year-old son, did, to be fair, and there you were.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of being back up in Auckland, I suppose, is the sort of once you're in the thick of things, you're sort of around and able to be called up to do things kind of last minute. So, jumped on ZM. It was great.
Because you are from Chicha 03, you're from Christchurch.
Yeah, born and bred, Christchurch.
Whereabouts?
So the first 7 years of living, we were in South Brighton.
Right.
Just down the road from the beach. Yeah. And then
it's got a nice pier.
Well, that's New Brighton.
Oh, is this completely different?
You got South Brighton, New Brighton, North New Brighton, just down from New Brighton.
Right.
Yeah, south, coincidentally.
I just feel like that pier is very sort of English.
It's a great pier. The New Brighton pier is a fantastic
pier. And is
it?
My wife takes the mickey because it's like pear and pear and bear and bear. I don't know which pear that is, but
pier.
A pier.
I don't know. But anyway, so that's where I was, South Brighton for 7 years. Then we moved out to Waikaku Beach, which is about 30 k's north of Christchurch.
Right.
And lived there, grew up there, and mum's still out there at Waikaku Beach. So Waikaku's like home.
Wonderful. And I may even be wrong about this, but I'm presuming you went to the famous, whatever it is, Canterbury Broadcasting School or something?
No. Okay. I actually went to university.
Right. What?
I went to Canterbury University.
You're educated.
Yeah.
What have you got?
I've got a bugger all in political science.
Oh, of course you have.
And mass communication.
Actually, I've got one of those too.
Yeah. And then I got a postgraduate degree in journalism, which was under Jim Tully there as well.
It was sort of a bit of a legend.
Yeah.
So he's probably still around.
He absolutely
hopefully he's going to listen to this. That's a new subscription. Subscribe now. Generally famous. Hashtag.
Jim Tully's got quite high standards.
Oh, you're just like, let's have it out right now. You're a little bit passive aggressive with me. I feel like whenever we meet, there's a little bit. That's political, isn't it? It's because you're sort of tribally Labour or something.
Well, you're just
stereotyping me as a Tory.
Well, I just feel like you're the kind, but you got to give politicians shit. You're politicians.
Oh, you wouldn't with St. Jacinda. You'd be all over.
No,
you're amazing,
I would.
Jacinda.
I'd give her a yarn.
Yeah.
If she needed a yarn.
Okay, so I just need to not take things so personally.
Yeah, I think so.
Be less of a pedal.
Yeah.
Okay, so you did that. So
Jacinda's obviously also a little bit cooler than you. Like, she's DJ'd and stuff, Like, have you got on the decks lately?
I think you need to get up to speed with where Auckland's at the moment, my friend. Things have moved on a little bit.
Have they?
Yeah, but look, let's not dwell on that. And so you did all that. You're overqualified, and then you come out, and then you're in the media game. What's your first gig? Role?
So the first job that I did, so I finished uni at the end of 2007, moved straight up here to Auckland and jumped into the Radio Live, as it was then, Radio Live newsroom.
Yep.
And that was in the basement of one of the old MediaWorks buildings on Ponsonby Road.
Yes.
And
I do vaguely remember that.
Yeah, it was sort of like you entered through this back street to go in there. And so that was a small team.
And you were news. You were a young news, you were sort of jack of all trades, journo.
Well, the second day on the job, it was such a small team that you were just absolutely thrown into the deep end. So the second day of my first job, I had to go to the depositions hearing of the Kahui twins murder investigation. So, and I remember Kevin Hercock, my boss at the time.
Oh yeah, my wife used to work for Kevin.
He literally whipped me out a piece of, at the time it was NZPA, the New Zealand Press Association, used to pay for their copy, so he just whipped me out a one-page A4 NZPA copy and was like, off you go, down to court.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it was a great job though. Small,
so
as I say.
You weren't sort of straight into sort of, I don't know, light and fluffy
No.
cats up a tree, interview Granny Smith about, how sad she is about that. You were in the deep end.
Yeah, well, it was. I worked there for nearly 3.5 or so years, and yeah, I did cover the Kahui trial, the Nia Glassy trial in Rotorua, Anthony Dixon. I went down to Napier when the Napier Siege happened.
Yes.
So yeah, there were some massive stories that I covered, but then I did also get to do. I remember getting sent to Fashion Week in my first year as a journalist. And I thought that would be really exciting. I was like, oh, okay, all the cool people and stuff, and agonising over what to wear. Hot tip for anyone attending Fashion Week: don't wear heels because you're standing around all day.
Right.
It was a bad idea.
Yes.
But I get there, and I'm sitting in these fashion shows, and then I'm expected to file like a voice report. So you'd usually write a sort of you'd be like, there'd be an intro, and then it's like, Brodie Kane is down at Fashion Week, and you'd be like, blah, 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 from Fashion Week for Radio Live, I'm Brodie Kane. But I was like, what am I supposed to say? Like, what is a radio...
The frocks are looking good
yeah,
today.
Florals and spring,
Lime and blue.
Yeah, I had no idea. I just sort of looked around to see the who's who were there and sort of faffed my way through a couple of voice reports.
Because, I'm supposed to be careful what I say here as a 45, almost 46-year-old guy with my sort of demographics. But, you were looking very glamorous today, I think.
This is the run of the mill, yeah.
You didn't even try this morning.
No,
you knew it was a chat with the Bridges. You're not going to mean. Whereas if it was just Cindy, you sort of, you would have.
But
really?
we'd be going partying, wouldn't we? But no, I feel like, no, because a lot of the time I work from home.
Yes.
So when you're working from home, I'm in my trackies and
me too.
So I do like to make an effort when I'm leaving the house.
I sort of hadn't realised, but it makes a lot of sense because you're also a bit of an athlete, and we'll come to that. But you spent quite a lot of time as a sports journo.
When I was at Radio Live and then News Talk ZB, you kind of got to do a bit of everything. I covered a bit of sport, having an interest in it, and it was always interest in it. And then when I worked on 7 Sharp and was in Christchurch, you got to cover all the sport because I was the only reporter down there. Then came the breakfast presenting job for sport, and that was a new role they had created when there was a new look breakfast team brought forward.
Who was presenting it at that stage?
That was Hilary Barry and Jack Tame.
Yep.
And then Daniel Faitaua was the newsreader, and then Sam for a bit was still on weather, and then Maddie came in, and I was sport. So that was actually a really tough job because I'd never presented, so to speak. I'd never read an auto cue. I didn't know all the sort of studio ins and outs, and also had to sort of be the one-man band sports show. So
but it was a break for you. I mean, that was a big break. You were on telly.
Well, I'd been on telly for quite a few years prior.
Fair go and stuff.
Yeah. But this was the first sort of presenting gig. So it was hectic. It was hard, but also great opportunity to get around the country and meet people. And
did you, my sense is you did, because you're very sporty and you love all of that. You enjoyed that role?
Loved it.
And how's sports sort of journo work and presenting, how's that different from the other stuff? I suppose what I'm asking you is I just sort of sense that would be quite a different gig. You're dealing with quite different characters. It's not like, crusty, overweight politicians, coming into the hits and trying to be everyman people and, what is this? It's quite, it's a real scene. Well,
I did, funny story for you, I did actually apply to be a political reporter once. for TVNZ. Didn't get it, which I think I'm absolutely okay with, because I feel like it's a very specific kind of
Quite
role,
narrow.
and you get sucked into a vortex, don't you, of Wellington, of the beehive. But so I have always been interested in politics, but what I actually think was interesting was when I was like younger, a younger journo, I was like hard news, and I always wanted to go overseas and be a foreign correspondent, and really loved, working in straight news, breaking news, that kind of thing. It wasn't actually until I got a job on 7 Sharp. And if you remember back in the first year of 7 Sharp, it got an absolute flogging. Everyone that was the first show where everyone in Twitter was alive and kicking, and everyone chimed in on their opinion on it, because what it was trying to do was kind of be a lighter version of a news show. And that was an interesting year to be involved in it. But also that was a year where, a few of my kind of, I guess, mentors and bosses were like, you actually quite suit a personality style of reporting. I kind of like grappled with that, because I was like, but I want to be taken seriously, But then ultimately, as I sort of developed, you're like, well, actually, you can do both. Yeah. You absolutely can do both. But I feel like when going into sport, sport brings people so much joy.
Yes.
As we've seen in the pandemic, it's one of those things that, when we all got to watch the Olympics, it reminded us of how much it can give us, and how amazing athletes can be. So for me, sport was fun, because it can make you cry and laugh and have all the emotions and stay up overnight and watch, Wimbledon final and things like that. So I love that role, and I'm actually about to
do more of that, I think.
Yeah, I'm just about to work on the Rugby World Cup, which starts in Auckland, the
Amazing.
Women's, which I'm so excited about.
I don't feel like, but maybe it's just me because I am a little bit under the rock, I don't feel like that's had the profile it deserves so far.
I would say that I've seen...
'Cause it's massive.
It is massive, and I have seen a lot around... I think Auckland can be a funny place as well. Like, when you live in Christchurch and something's happening, everyone's like talking about it. But Auckland are like, on the day, well, off we go. So I hope that we see people getting amongst it, because it will be incredible.
Yeah, I hope it gets the crowds and the hoopla it deserves. Your favourite sports? Like, and when I'm thinking about you as a journo back then, but you can answer it more generally if you want. Like, what are the ones you're into and that you like to follow, and you were sort of... Yeah.
I do enjoy watching tennis.
Yep.
I love watching...
Me too.
I like, watching Rafa and play with Federer last week. It was like, whoa, in their last game, in Federer's last game. I really enjoy rugby. I love rugby league. And then I get really like fizzed up when it's Olympics or Commonwealth Games time as well. The worst thing is...
what ones don't you like then?
Which ones don't I like? I'll be brutally honest with you. I really struggle to watch golf.
Yes.
I appreciate it, but if you were like, hey, we're going to sit down and watch golf today, I'd be like, are we? But, yeah, so I struggle with that. I love cricket. Not big on the test, on the 5 days. But one
long.
day or 20, I'm like, let's go.
I like to say I admire the test cricket as a thing, but it's not, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. So your favourite sort of sporting characters, like if you think back to that time, but, the ones you say, they were always good for a comment. They were going to give you something. They weren't going to kind of do this monosyllabic all black coach stuff. No. Yes, we played well, kind of. Who the characters you liked?
Well, that was always that's what I always thrived on, a great challenge being, it's particularly...
Bring something out of them.
Yeah, but...
Show me some emotion!
Yeah, well, I remember going one time down to an All Blacks press conference, and it was, I think it might have been 2018. Basically, the All Blacks were about to break the world record for the most consecutive wins.
Yes.
I think they were playing Australia at Eden Park. And so I rocked down there, and you're there and you're sitting in the press conference, and I'm pretty sure I was the only chick there at that one, and there's all these boring questions being asked, and you're just like, and so then I wanted to, I was able to interview Bowden Barrett, and I remember being like, what am I going to do that's, because then sometimes you're like, am I trying to force being wacky and funny? But he let me stick Post-it notes on his face because I was like, let's try and break another world record, and it was trying to stick the most post-it notes on your face within a minute.
Well, you probably broke that record for New Zealand rugby players or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then we had like Sonny Bill Williams for one part of breakfast, we had a breakfast truck which you could go live in. Sonny Bill Williams came and drove around with me for an hour in the car. We ordered McDonald's drive-through. So actually, when you can get past the gatekeepers, they're all fantastic. Joseph
and
Parker.
up for that stuff.
Joseph Parker is amazing. Like he's I've interviewed him a lot over the years. We got him in when I worked on Fair Go, and he took part in our flat pack challenge, like seeing how fast he could build a flat pack bedside cabinet. He actually won. He was the fastest.
I would have been terrible at that.
Yeah, I hate it.
Like they'd be like that's like a nightmare.
Yeah, I don't flat pack. I'd never. But then, of course,
right.
I've had a lot to do with the Black Ferns. One of my favourite people is Ruby Tui. She's just remarkable and so friendly and so approachable. And then, of course, Dame Lisa Carrington is another one who I actually used to do surf club with back in the day. And like Emma Twigg. Emma Twigg is one of the greatest female sports stars in New Zealand. And she when the first lockdown happened, I did lockdown with Mum, and we started the Joe Bro Show, and we interviewed well-known Kiwis every night during that.
You had these characters, right?
Yeah, every night. And then so Emma Twigg was a big fan of the Joe Bro Show, and then one day she messaged me like a few months later, and she was like, "Hey, I'm down in Christchurch. Are you running this weekend? I'd love to come running with you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Yes, absolutely." And then I was like, "Okay, we're going up Mount Richardson." Da-da-da-da. She's like, "Oh gosh, I've Googled it now. I'm really nervous." And I was like, "Look, I can assure you, you've got nothing to worry about." Yeah. So she came running with us, and now she's a good pal. And she came back to my house, and Mum cooked us breakfast. And
fantastic.
I actually think we're very lucky here in Aotearoa that we have, like, our sports stars do remarkable things.
Yes.
But they're just human. Like, they're just like us.
But they're ordinary.
Yeah.
You know, they still go for a poo. They do all these things.
They
moving right
do.
along. Sorry. So anyway, the picture I'm getting is that you, by this time, you're actually a really experienced broadcaster and journalist. You know, you've been on Fair Go, you've been on 7 Sharp, you've done the breakfast thing and so on. And if you look back on the legends of broadcasting and presenting and so on you work with, I mean, who are some of your faves?
People that I've worked with?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't have to be, but...
Well, one of my favourite journalists and also a good friend, but was also such an incredible mentor to me, was Ali Moore. And Ali, I remember, took me out on a couple of occasions when I was about to start working in front of camera, and taught me how to do piece to cameras, and taught me how to look down the barrel of a camera and stuff like that. So she always took the time. Is there
an art to this though? You don't just kind of look at it?
Well, basically, okay. I will share this. So I'm like, is this a trade secret? No. So she was basically like, look through the camera like you're looking at your closest mates. You've just come home from work and you're telling them about your day. That's the kind of warmth and engagement that you want through the camera. So instead of looking at the camera, you're imagining a whole bunch of people sitting there listening to everything you've got to say. And so she was also like, you know, don't be afraid to take them with you. So that was sort of more of a different style than your, I guess, 6 o'clock news, where you do have to just pretty much stand there and deliver. But, you know, take the people with you and encourage the camera to follow you and stuff like that. So I always took that as some of the most valuable advice. And
she didn't have to pull you aside and give you a bit of that. And
no.
It was an act of kindness.
But I was really lucky. My first job at TVNZ was actually as an associate producer on Q&A.
Right.
So I worked on that for a year.
That sounds very earnest and serious, Brodie Kane.
Yeah, it was. Oh, yeah, it was very serious. I do actually...
Did you have a clipboard?
I actually remember, this is quite a funny story. John Key was the Prime Minister at the time. And I remember he was coming in for an interview in the Auckland TVNZ office, and I was actually quite hungover. And he was...
Which doesn't happen often.
No. But it was one of those nights where I was like, I'll just have a couple more, and then you wake, and then you know, it was silly, foolish anyway. And so then I go downstairs to greet him in the lift, and I was like, I actually still think there's alcohol coming out of my pores. So I was like, he walks in, I was like, good morning, Prime Minister, and then sort of almost tried to hold my breath. And he just sort of silent looking at me, and he's like, big night? So most of the time, completely professional, couple of slip-ups along the way. But he was always a good sport.
There's three things that I love about Trade Depot. Probably more, but three that really stand out to me. The first is the way that Trade Depot is 100% Kiwi owned. I still reckon that counts for something. And what it also means in a really practical sense is they understand you as a Kiwi and what it is you're about. In fact, Trade Depot, they live and they walk the talk. They live and breathe the great Kiwi DIY mindset. The second thing I really, really like, and in fact can spend a lot of time getting sucked into, is that Trade Depot stocks more than 4,500 top quality home improvement products. You heard me right there, 4,500. And that's because it's New Zealand's largest online home improvement store. When you're in there, you can get the colour, the type, the size, the particularity you want from their top quality home improvement products of every, as I say, shape and size. The third thing that I really like, and I think is why Trade Depot's doing so well, is low prices always. There's free delivery with minimum spends for Auckland, Hamilton and Christchurch. T's and C's apply. Check out tradedepot.co.nz or call into one of their 3 stores in Auckland, Christchurch or the new superstore in Hamilton near the airport. And so then, of course, you're at the Hits Christchurch or the big anchor or whatever we call them. And how long was that for?
Oh, COVID's really mucked my kind of sense of time and years.
Feels like it was a while, though.
It was like 2.5 years. So I went down there. Started in radio, have always loved radio. Went down there, took the job, took it as a challenge because the show, the station down there, it was like not rating amazingly. So the challenge was to get some more listeners. And so I worked with Dave Fitzgerald. And the idea was to just keep. It was a local show, so it was Canterbury. So it was just like pushing local, celebrating local.
There's not that much local stuff anymore.
No, there's really not.
Yeah.
But we worked really, really hard and loved it. But then we sort of did that, and
COVID hit.
Well, no, COVID was definitely on the outskirts.
Yes,
but just before it really kicked off in New Zealand is when we got made redundant. And it was really out of the blue. Like we were like,
right.
Oh, right. Didn't see this coming. Like didn't see it coming at all. And then sort of as the next sort of few weeks transpired, then COVID hit and it was like, oh, okay.
And I might be fundamentally making this up, but I feel like, you were just devastated by that.
Well, I just wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, which is sort of the worst, right? Because it's all fine if you can sort of see it coming and you're thinking about your exit strategy and say, that's going to be good. Actually, I've got this, this and this. But so it happens and
It was, do you know what though? Someone said to me very early on, you mustn't take it personally. And that was really good advice.
Yeah.
It's sort of able to sort of like clear that kind of, what did I do wrong type thing. But
hard to though.
Yeah, yes and no. I feel like I did that more. But then the sort of when you were without a job and then lockdown hit and then all these other media companies are blowing out and shutting down and people are losing their jobs, it was like, I'm not going to get a job anywhere. No one's going to leave their jobs voluntarily.
No.
And I was down in Christchurch, so I just was sort of like, what the hell am I going to do? But luckily I had a bit of time on my hands to think about that at home.
Yes, and I think what you've also said is it shook things up in a good way.
It did. I think a lot of people, the funny thing is when you talk about being made redundant, the redundancy club is quite large.
Yeah.
And you actually can
Probably
have
happens
some...
to everyone over a career.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How many times have you been made redundant?
Hey, I chose...
Was it redundancy?
I've chosen myself. Buddy.
What is it?
This is not...
You are the
Brody, this is not about me.
Oh, but
this
I was
is
always
not
going to
about
come
me.
in and
This is
the piss a little bit.
This is all about you.
Yeah.
You know, I'm getting in your head.
Yeah.
Right? So moving on, Brodie Kane Media is like a company.
It is registered.
Which
it
sounds
is a company.
quite sort of like something.
Yeah.
And how's it going?
It's actually great. The first sort of year again was 2020, and it was like, okay, I'm just gonna give this a crack. I don't entirely have a business plan, but I'm going to try and do some of the things that I have a skill set in, and see how that goes. It sort of evolved, and I would say is still evolving. But what's sort of come to the forefront of that is podcasts. So I host 2 and manage another 2 at the moment. I absolutely love the space, and so that's a big chunk of where I see the business growing. And then I guess the other stuff is still just me at the moment, as I say, contracting, freelancing out in radio, ZM yesterday, television, and I do a bit of social media as well.
Bit of dancing,
yeah.
Amazing. So that's all exciting, but I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I imagine it's also hard. I mean, at one level, it's like, oh my God, I've got to get up in the morning and make something happen because I'm not just walking in hungover as associate producer of Q&A meeting the Prime Minister and they'll pay me anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you're hungover and you decide not to work that day, well, who's paying you, Basically, at the moment, I'm still in that phase where pretty much a massive chunk of the work that I'm doing is not paid. So, like, most of the hours I work during the week are just grinding away with the vision that it is all going to work. And then I'm, really lucky and grateful that another skill set of mine, like MC work and like public speaking, can pay the bills while I carry on with my vision and my dream. So that's sort of how it works at the moment.
What have been your learnings as a businesswoman?
One of them, actually, I've got 2. So one of them is always to ask and seek out help from people that are in either a similar position or you've learnt from in the past. Because what we like to do is we feel like, and I often feel this, you have a sense of pride. I'm very competitive, and often we see asking for help as a sign of weakness or failure. Well, I learnt pretty early on that actually it's not. And the more you open yourself up to people's suggestions, constructive criticism, the more you can sort of develop. So I think it's particularly in that space, it's also really good to be vulnerable, and people are only too willing to help you. The second thing is, and this is one that I always have to pull myself back on, is when you sort of, like, well, for me, when I'm working for myself, have all these different goals, it can be quite easy to feel like you have to have 20 things on the go at once, because you're like, I want to do this podcast and I want to open this, but I want to pitch this travel show and I want to do this and I want to do this. And so when you've got all these things in your mind, it sort of clouds just the main focus that you should be working towards. So definitely. I like to go do it properly, one at a time. So that's what I've been trying to learn. So at the moment it's like, right, let's get these podcasts really hissing. Let's get them all ready to go and sell them and get that going. And so that's a priority. Now, doesn't mean that you can't do the other stuff, but don't try and do it all at the same time, because you'll end up sort of just spreading yourself too thin and not doing a good job at the main one.
That's
so it's
actually
like priority list.
That is great learning, and I say to my valued colleagues who are amazing and have these great enthusiasms and ideas, that's awesome, but implementation of some of them is the most important thing, right?
Because otherwise you're like, what am I doing? I'm so
what about
busy.
over here? Let's go do this one. Yeah, and I think that's right. And you've moved from Christchurch to Auckland. Do you just quietly, is there, because my sense would be you are a fierce Cantabrian, is there a little sneaky, quiet sense of betrayal there, or no?
No, I've always loved Auckland. I've actually spent most of my career up here, so obviously moved up here when I was 21. I've always loved Auckland. I love Christchurch,
Yep.
But I'm not sort of one of the, apart from when obviously the Crusaders are playing, I'm not, people always go, Auckland, and I'm like, well, I'm not that kind of person. I have moved
Yes.
from Christchurch to Auckland so many times.
And I think the parochialism is not what it was 20 years ago, is my sense. I feel like people are less parochial around New Zealand. I don't know.
I feel like as well, most people that will sort of comment about it haven't lived in Auckland or whatever. But for me, it's a great city to live in, and it's where I want to and need to be right now. So
what do you miss about Christchurch?
My appearance.
Yeah.
I miss running in the Port Hills.
Yep.
I miss the dog. I miss my friends down there, but I don't, and I miss I had quite a good training lifestyle down there, so I had a really great bunch of mates that I'd train with and stuff. So I miss that element of the lifestyle down there, that you can jump in the car and go for a paddle in the Waimakariri River, and then go and half an hour over and go and run an amazing trail. So I miss that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Canterbury's amazing for that,
Yeah,
isn't it?
really, really good.
Yeah.
But I'm very happy to be back up here.
And what do you like about Tamaki Makaurau?
I like that all my best mates are here.
Yep.
I love that it's a busy, vibrant city with people getting on and doing it.
Yep.
And I because I love the hustle. I love, meeting people and connecting and all of that. I love the beaches. The beaches are beautiful. It's got a good vibe. I mean, I'm not saying it's perfect. There's a lot to it that is, a bit cooked. Traffic and only one bridge, and now it gets too windy and it's like, sorry, you can't go over there. But, in my kind of line of work, it's a great place to live. And, it's a miserable day out there today, but it's not cold. Like, it's better climate.
Yep.
Again, some good places to go running and stuff like that as well.
That's for sure. Dancing with the Stars.
Yes.
Amazing. Did you enjoy it?
Yes, I did. It was also the hardest thing I've ever done.
Because it's incredibly intense.
Well, if you think about, very intense, but also, we are, when you're an adult, when you get to adult life, you tend to do most of the stuff you do is you're either good at or you enjoy it. You know what I mean? You stay pretty well in your comfort zone.
Yeah.
This was 10 weeks completely out of your comfort zone, learning something that you're not naturally good at, and then, oh, by the way, we'll chuck you on telly to do it. I was really fit physically when I went into it because I'd been training for the coast to coast, but so that element.
But I presume, I'm making a massive presumption here, but my sense is you're doing all that kind of athletic work, you end up being not that flexible.
Oh,
yeah. And then you're and then you're meant to be kind of touching your toes and doing pirouettes and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah, my hip flexors are absolutely shot. So that was always a challenge, but it was the mental challenge actually. But also, and it was just this weekly cycle of emotions that you knew were coming. So you'd build up to the live shows and you'd be like, oh my God, what's going to happen? I'm going to fall on my face, I'm going to fall down the stairs. You'd think about all that kind of stuff. And you had practiced your routines so many times, but for whatever reason, you'd be like, what's the first step? Just all of that kind of sheer panic. But it was, and then someone would get voted off. So on Monday night you were furious and sad and emotional, and then you'd had no sleep. But then you'd get back, and then on Tuesday you had to learn 2 new dances.
And by your own estimation, how do you reckon you went? And would you do? Would you change anything about what you did?
No, not at all. Yeah,
you gave your best every time.
Yeah, and actually, it wasn't until week 5, because it was a 6-week, it was a shortened, usually they go for 10 weeks, but this was a shortened season. That's why we had to learn 2 dances every week. But it wasn't until week 5 that I actually reflected on the fact that I had quite significantly improved, because you just, as I say, in that cycle, you've just thought you've nailed a dance, then you forget it and you've got a new one to dance. So I wasn't really paying much attention to whether I was improving or not. You're just sort of in survival mode.
Yes.
But it was actually when we got sort of to that business end, it was like, actually, you're actually doing quite well.
Yeah.
And then it was like, it was getting closer and closer to potentially making the final and being like, am I going to get to dance to Proud Mary? This could actually be a bloody thing.
Yes.
And then it was. And then it was like, okay, this is unreal.
Amazing.
Yeah. So it was an incredible experience. I would say to anyone, if you're going to do it, but it completely takes over your life.
I've said no because
I'm relieved at that.
Yes, that's why I said no.
Yeah.
I just think of all because you are right, outside comfort zone, I can live with that, but I just feel like one should stick with the several things they may be possibly okay at and not kind of move into areas where you know you're not good at.
I have a question for you though.
Yes.
Do you think you'd be better than David Seymour?
I
mean, you wouldn't twerk, surely.
Boss, no, I don't know that I would.
Yeah.
I think I'd be a bad combination of unfit and inflexible and just wooden. And
people would laugh at you.
Yeah, and as much as being a good sports orchid, I don't need that shit anymore.
I'm pleased for you.
My parents wouldn't. My kids and relatives would enjoy it. No, I don't know about it. Yeah. I don't want to get too serious on you, but I feel like because in addition to all the fun stuff, you've got a master's.
Masters.
Oh, yeah,
Double major,
whatever.
Post-grad.
A Bachelor of Arts in Politics and Communication Studies. But what do you make of the current media environment? I just ask because you've been through lots of it, and then you're out on your own now in a small media little outlet that's doing a cool job and some. Yeah. So what's your sort of?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I've kind of had this conversation a couple of times this week with us being in a very fascinating period of time where some people are calling it the democratization of media, whereby anyone that's got a phone and a TikTok account or an Instagram or can sort of do it. So I feel.
And yet, can I just add in there and then let you go at it? On the other side of it, and I'm not being political here, you've got RNZ and TVNZ potentially coming together in this massive wildebeest of a thing that's going to kind of, run the show. Yeah,
and I sort of feel like we're in an interesting time where there's a massive saturation of information and misinformation and everyone wanting to be someone. There are people on TikTok that do not have journalistic qualifications that are like holding their little microphone and
they got a view
analysing things.
And their own facts.
Yeah. So we're in an interesting stage. One thing I have really been kind of, I guess, concerned by is particularly through the pandemic is the relationship that the public has with, I guess, let's call it the mainstream media. And I worry for society. There are behaviours that have happened that cause people not to trust various pockets of the media, right?
Yes.
And so that worries me because then people look for alternatives, and there are so many alternatives that aren't bound by rules or don't follow rules or march to the beat of their own agenda. And what we've seen what effect that has. Donald Trump has a lot to answer for fake news and peddling that whole don't believe the media narrative. And then sometimes I get frustrated when the media is a dick, and I'm like, you're not helping yourselves. But then I understand the pressures of media companies by like the powers that be. We've got to sell ads, we've got to sell clicks, we've got to do
keep
this.
Going.
And so the poor old journos are caught up in the shit of their big companies who need return on investment in that, pressuring for more papers to be sold, for more ratings. So it's a worrying time, but I feel like we're sort of almost at a peak of like there's just content, and I think it will all settle.
Right.
That's my optimistic view.
I was going to say, that's a very optimistic view of life. But thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, no, that's a really good and I think nuanced perspective you got, and from experience that you've got. I want to talk to you about sort of personally, and one thing I knew this anyway from one or two of our mutual friends like Mortz and others, and but you've referred to her, I think 2 or 3 times in our chat. I mean, your mum is what I'm presuming is the most important person in your life.
She's my best friend.
Yeah.
And
does that raise problems being your best friend? I mean, is she still capable of giving you a telling off, or you don't need those anymore?
Oh, right? Yeah. Yes, no, she does. Yeah,
right.
I know not to mess with her. I pick my battles, eh? but yeah, we have a wonderful relationship, and we're very, very similar. And she's just so, like, what I've watched with her over the years, I mean, she's done some amazing things, like swimming the Cook Strait, for goodness sake. And athleting and that. But what I've always, like...
What were her sports?
Well, she was surf lifesaving and swimmer. Right. And then she got into, like, coast to coast Ironman.
Amazing.
Long things as well. I feel like when you're younger, you're probably not learning and appreciating as much the type of qualities and the type of person. But what I can reflect on now, which I think is absolutely incredible, is that she's always been unashamedly herself, and she's always been a really strong woman. But what we've seen is, in the, I guess, late 90s, early 2000s and stuff, as she was sort of stepping out herself more in kind of public-facing roles in local government, is that she was still under that whole stroppy, words like stroppy, outspoken councillor Joe Kane.
Which for a man would be kind of strong and decisive or whatever it is.
Yeah. So, and she would tell it like it was, and, not everyone liked that. And so quite often she would be, that Joe Kane. And it's like, but she never wavered, she always stuck to her guns, and she never, like, put up with people's crap. And so when I look at that now and think, here's this woman who has always had people's best interests in heart. Now, you might not agree with her, but you can still at the bottom line say, I know that at least what she's doing, she's giving 110%, and I might not agree with it, but boy, oh boy, I admire that.
Yeah.
She and a classic example is she sits to the left of centre, but she'd always have great sort of banter and relationships with like Jerry Brownlee and Stephen Joyce, even though she'd never vote for them. But that that's that kind of person that she is, realising that you have to work with everyone to sort of be successful.
Would you ever go into politics?
Oh God, no.
Because
I couldn't think of anything worse. I'm going to say I'd rather shit in my hands and clap.
Well, you've just given us a headline.
You know what I mean? Like, I have the utmost respect. I have the utmost respect for people that do it, because I think far too often we forget how hard. I'm
sorry, I'm stuck on that phrase.
You can use it.
I might
keep it.
Well, not on this podcast, but I might privately. It may come into my conversation. I like that.
Like we get, like I've given
very
you,
evocative.
I've given you shit over the years and whatnot, and politicians do get a hard time, but fundamentally, and way more so now with social media and that, but people, it's a thankless bloody task,
It is.
And so.
And it's hard. And
you get in there, you go in there with your ideas, and you're like, I want to do this and I want to change this, but ultimately you have to sort of kind of toe the party line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you go in, you're voted as an electorate MP, and you can't open a can silently. I can tell you that.
It's an almighty peach, ginger, sparkling water. I've just said that, so no one needs to edit this show. Because so far it's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get you, and I agree with you. Well, I feel like we can't not talk about. You're a serious sports person.
I'm an athlete. Yeah.
How long have you been running?
Well, I've always enjoyed running. I ran my first half marathon when I was in my early 20s. And then I kind of, in 20s, like mid-20s and that, like I'm living the dream, being a journalist and travelling and stuff. It wasn't actually until like I got into my 30s that I've started doing like marathons and longer distance stuff.
Right.
So I don't know. I just caught the bug, really.
Best time in like a marathon or half that you're proud of?
The fastest half was 1:50.
It's good.
And and my first marathon is still my fastest, which was 4:15.
Cool. Fantastic.
But I've morphed away from giving a
Sure.
toss
But I was just interested to get a sense of where we're at here.
Yeah.
And so why do you do it?
What I love, I really enjoy running. It's kind of my form of therapy, self-therapy and meditation, because I'm not a super spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
But I love, what I've enjoyed most about it is the mental challenges that come with it. So no one run is the same, and you can go out and have an absolutely shocking day.
Yeah.
The minute you finish, though, you will always feel okay and you will always learn something from it. And so what I love so much about pushing the boundaries with some of these kind of ridiculously long challenges and that I'm doing, like the Kepler challenge in December.
Amazing.
Is...
What's that, like 60 Ks?
Yeah. Is that it teaches you more about yourself that you can then pass on into other aspects of your life. So the hard days, the good days, the preparation, the looking after yourself, it all passes over into other parts of life. So that's what I love about it, is the mental toughness it can give you.
There's 17 things I want to talk to you about, but we're running out of time. I'm just going to refer to it, and we're not even going to go there. But like one thing I was interested in is that you were in the territorials.
4 years.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And you enjoyed that? So says me, I'm only going to refer to it. But
yeah. Absolutely loved it. Great time. Went to Brunei, did a jungle exercise. Amazing. Very, very fond of my time there. Always taught me really good time management as well. And make your bed at the start of the day, every day. Good life lessons.
There's no perfect way into this. So I'm just going to ask you, because I've seen you have been quite candid about some of this stuff before. I mean, and no one necessarily needs a boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, or anything. But is there a Mr. Kane in your life?
No.
And you told Women's Weekly probably quite a while back. Look, this is my 8-minute Google search.
Yeah.
Quote, I've been single for 30 years, end quote. Goodness. I mean, what, you got no time for dating? You're sort of not...
Do you know the worst thing about that interview is that I joked about that at the end, like the interview was not even supposed to be about that.
And the put it in.
And that was the headline. I mean, well, of course, at that time, it's like, of course I've been single for 30 years. I am 30 of like... Oh, anyway, basically, what's the deal with that? I'd love to meet someone. Yep. I just haven't.
Yep.
And that's also fine, though. Like, it doesn't define me. I'm not like, ooh, society is like, oh, have you found a nice man yet? And I'm like, nah, geez, but the worst thing is, Simon, is that as you get older and you've become so used to yourself and your independence.
And those long runs.
But the standards are only getting higher. So I think people probably assume that the longer you're single that your standards drop. Oh, no. So if some lovely fella is going to come around now, he's going to have to be fantastic.
What would you like? Give me some attributes here.
He would have to be kind, respectful, but also in some level intellectually stimulate me.
You don't want a doofus.
A doofus.
You don't want a doofus.
Well, you just want someone that you can have
can't hold a conversation with you.
Yeah. So someone that is comfortable with you being a strong woman and not intimidated by.
Well, that was what I was going to ask you, because I would think, right, that would be, because as you say, your standards I think that's right, the standards get high, and rightly so at one level. But do you think you would be intimidating to, I don't know, Jim the plumber or Steve the accountant, because you're smart, you're strong, you're high profile?
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, let's not just pigeonhole Jim the plumber and Steve the electrician.
Sure.
But,
anyone.
Terry the chief executive might also be intimidated. Totally. You know what I mean? So
yeah, totally.
Terry the chief executive. but probably more so.
We're going to get complaints from Terry now.
Probably more so. But I do think that that's at play. But that doesn't worry me. I'm not like, gosh, I better power myself down a bit.
Yeah.
At all. So
and yours is a modern story, right? I mean, you are a single. I mean, this is the world we live in.
Yeah.
One thing I'm just really fascinated in is when I did Google you, one thing that came up like 19 times, okay, not 19, maybe 2, but is, quote, is Brodie Kane dating Ryan Bridge? Have you seen these stories?
Oh, that's quite funny. That was years ago. We went to Queenstown.
Well, they still rank quite highly.
Do they?
Yes, they do.
No, but I can confirm that Ryan Bridge and I are not dating. But we did enjoy that because it was like, oh my God, we went down to Queenstown together and people were like, oh.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
So you've seen. That
shock horror. Friends go on holiday together.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
What's the future hold for you?
Oh, gosh. Look, it's funny because you say that at a time where I've just moved into a new house. And so life has been quite hectic, and I've very much been asking myself that over the past wee while as well. And I'm kind of a person that has, like a 1 year goal and 5 years. But ultimately, I would love the podcast network to expand. And I would love, in turn, that to become a bit more of a, not just podcast, but the people that are involved are creating a bit more video content and stuff like that. I would love to make a few television shows. When I say television shows, I probably also mean shows that are not just on television, because obviously not everyone's watching normal television, but I've got a few goals in that area. And just keep on just giving everything a bloody good crack.
Eat your heart out, Rupert Murdoch. Brodie Kane Media is coming at you.
Well, I mean, Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News, doesn't he? So
I pick you as a big Fox News watcher. I mean, I don't know. It's just something.
God.
You give off that kind of feng shui.
If you ever want to go and watch something and think that this is not real, that's when you go and watch Fox News.
We wrap up every time with 3 questions. I've asked every guest so far, and I'm going to ask you, and we call it general knowledge. What single object would you save from your new going, because we've heard you've just gone into one new house?
A single object? Is it your flatmate or the dog?
No, it can't be animate. That's a given.
Yeah,
we know you're going to
yeah.
rescue Sparky and
Oh,
Sarah and Steve.
Okay, so, gosh, I'd say this
is the first time in the interview, folks, that Brodie Kane is flustered. The hands are moving.
In my office is all my photos and my medals and race
medals.
bibs and stuff. Yeah, so probably the photos and the medals.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
What's the best night out you've ever had?
Oh, come on.
Be honest. Come on, give us something.
Have you got all day?
Give us best. I mean, it doesn't need to be best. Just to sort of, what's popping into your head right now? Where are you?
Oh, probably some of the best nights of my life have been at Rhythm and Vines, And I'm going again this year. And it's just when you're up on, literally you're in Gisborne, it's such a beautiful part of the country, you're night 3, it's the 31st, the sun's going down, you're with your best mates on a hill, an epic band is playing, and you're having a wild time.
Do people annoy you at that kind of thing? Come on, hey, Brodie!
It's fine.
Give me a selfie, Brodie!
It's absolutely fine. It's all part of it, isn't it?
All part of the gig.
Yeah.
You got to take the good and the bad, the
Yeah.
swings around it. What's the best advice given to you, and who gave it?
Do you know what? I actually can't attribute this piece of advice to someone, but it's sort of probably been morphed over the years. Not everyone will like you, and not everyone has to like you.
No, that's exactly right. And if they don't, they can shit in their hands and clap.
But you know what I mean, right?
Was that it? Did I get that right?
Yeah, but you kind of used it in a weird way. So you've got room to improve there.
You don't have IP on this.
Yeah, I do. But no, I just mean that we spend so much time seeking the validation of others, often people that we don't even know. I also appreciate that I'm not the kind of person that everyone wants to listen to or watch or anything, but that's absolutely fine. So once you can sit with that and not worry so much about that, and then have your how much swearing is allowed on this? Probably not the F word, eh? I always like to have.
there's probably one worse than that. Would prefer you didn't use.
I always have what I like to call
a
zero fucks pile. So every person should have a zero fucks pile,
right.
and you should really be aware of what should go on it.
Yes.
And that's mostly worrying about things or people that shouldn't worry you. As long as you listen to your nearest and dearest and the people you trust the most, and they can call you out for being a dick.
Yes.
But not everyone in the whole world has to like you.
Oh, it's good advice. It's a good thought. I am just going to say this, and I'm not just saying this to be silly or funny or anything. I'm predicting now, we're not meant to date these podcasts. We want them to be evergreen. But I'm predicting now that Brodie Kane, 49, will be kind of like Mayor of Timaki Makaurau, Auckland or Christchurch, something. I just see it. I just kind of see, I feel that in you. I've got
Really?
that public issues, quite strong views, high profile.
You're not the first person that said that to me this week either.
Well, there you go. It must be fate.
Oh.
It's been fantastic to talk to you, and we really appreciate having you on Generally Famous. You've been listening to Generally Famous. There's a new episode every Wednesday. You can listen to them all at stuff.co.nz/generallyfamous, or wherever you get your podcasts. In fact, if you follow us on Apple, Spotify, or any of the podcast apps, in fact, you'll get the latest episode automatically. Sounds good, right? Thanks to my producer, Chris Reed. I'm Simon Bridges. I really appreciate you listening. Generally Famous is proudly brought to you by Trade Depot. Generally famous for low prices, always.